Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. We are going to give the audience another moment or two to join in, grab a seat, grab a cup of water, coffee, tea, whatever you like, before we get to our conversation today. All right, I see folks trickling in, but I think it's time. Let's go ahead and get us started. So hello, everyone, and welcome to Conversations with Caregivers and Families. I'm Dr. Qwynn Galloway-Salazar, and I am so honored to be your host for today's episode. A little bit about me. I'm an Army veteran. I'm a spouse to a retired combat veteran, and I too have served as a caregiver. Now, let me tell you what I know for sure. Behind every great mission is a solid heartbeat. And that heartbeat is each and every one of you who are joining in today. It's the people we connect with, the communities we serve, and the stories that we honor. That's why we're so excited to bring you episodes of Conversations with Caregivers and Families, made possible by the incredible support of the USAA Foundation. This belief in the power of connection is at the core of everything we do, and that's where you come in. We need your voice, your experiences, and your perspectives. So we're inviting you to participate in a quick, anonymous demographic survey. Trust me, this small step will make a significant impact in helping us continue to bring programming such as today's episode. So on your screen right now, you should see a pop-up. Please just take a moment to fill it out. We appreciate you doing this along with us. Thank you. Give it another moment. All right. If this is your first time joining us, welcome. And if you are coming back for more, welcome back. We are so glad to have you. In this hour-long space, we are going to tackle tough conversations that really hit home and impact our community. But here's the beauty of it. Through these moments, we are learning from one another. We are discovering new resources. We are shifting the way we see our own stories. And most importantly, we are building resilience. Just a note, today's episode will be recorded and you'll be able to find it later on Psych Armor's YouTube channel. Also, I would love to encourage each and every one of you, jump in the chat, share your thoughts, share your questions. We are here to keep the conversations robust and going. So now that we're settled in, let's get into it. I am so thrilled to have two incredible guests with us today. Two of the most amazing humans I know that I also get to call my colleagues, but also my friends. Retired Command Sergeant Major Gretchen Evans and her husband and caregiver, Chaplain and Captain Robert Evans. Gretchen and Robert, we are so grateful to have you both here with us today. Can you please take a moment? I would do you all no justice if I sat and I read your bios. Can you tell our audience a little bit about yourselves?
Okay, I'll go first. I'm Gretchen Evans, and I'm an Army combat veteran. I served my country for 27 years until I was severely wounded, which ended my career. And then, like many veterans, the transition from being on active duty military for all those years to civilian world was a little treacherous and hard for me, compounded by the fact that I was also uh, had all these injuries that I had to deal with. So as I was doing this, the highs and lows of all that, I learned many lessons, some the hard way, some the easy way. But the main thing that I learned and that I want to talk about today as we get into this is that I couldn't have survived or thrived without what I call having my rope team. And my rope team consisted of all kinds of people, friends and family and clinicians and all kinds of things. And it took me to put my pride aside and ask for help uh, in order to get better. I couldn't do it myself. I think it's hard. You think you can, and being a successful military person, you think you have all the answers and that you can do this. But in reality, I think that you have to have a team with you that is willing to jump in there with you and support you as you can navigate this journey of the unknown, of trying to find what your new life looks like.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And thank you. Thank you for your service.
And I'm Bob Evans. I'm Gretchen's spouse. I'm a Navy chaplain of 25 and a half years, also a pastor of two congregations at both ends of my service. And then I became a chief chaplain in the VA and then later a COO in the VA healthcare systems. And my journey has been one of recognizing that as a chaplain, you can do an awful lot for most people, but it's not very easy to translate that into the relationship with your spouse. Gretchen is a high-functioning woman. She has overcome many things, but when she was in her toughest trial, in that deep trough of the sea of life, she needed that rope team. She needed physicians. She needed audiologists. She needed a great mental health counselor. These people, alongside myself, companion Gretchen, and that is what caregiving is all about. But I didn't recognize that I was a caregiver. I just thought I was a good husband, a good spouse, until all of a sudden, Gretchen said, "Bob, you're my caregiver." And as a result, I then sought caregiving support because I realized that I was tired. And there were times when I would get angry and upset, and I didn't know how to release that. So I contacted the Elizabeth Dole Foundation, and their Hidden Heroes program and their caregiving program are stellar. They're great advocates, and I'm one of the fellows for that foundation now in my retirement. But Gretchen and I have been advocating for veterans and for caregivers for quite some time now. And it is a very important piece of the puzzle of life, because without providing that advocacy, most people do not realize either that they're a caregiver or that they need respite and support along the journey. And that, I think, was the greatest lesson for me, was learning that I needed support. I needed respite. I needed some time to ferret out those issues that were popping up at each portion of the journey with Gretchen.
I think, thank you so much for sharing that and bringing your vulnerability to this space. When I think of both of you, there are a few words that pop immediately into my mind, right? Fun is one, fun is one, but adversity, embracing the journey, passionate, purpose-driven, determined, resilient, overcoming, and healing. And you all both just shared elements of your journey. And so I won't, and I'm grateful, so I won't go back to questions that I had thought of. But here's what I do want to do. I want to take a moment and focus on gender, right? And being intentional about sensitivity as it relates to gender. So follow me for a moment. But more often than not, we see the wives being the caregivers. And what's so unique about your experience and your journey is, Bob, you saying, yes, I am her husband, but I am also identifying, and I'm sure it wasn't easy at first, as her caregiver. When you think about that role as her husband and her caregiver, and you talked a bit about needing respite and needing support, can you share with us a little bit, what did that look like for you?
Respite and support. Respite, for one, meant going on retreats with no barriers and with unbroken spirit and with higher ground. Higher ground in particular was very, very important because we actually went together and we learned the skill of fly fishing, which we now do together. But it was a time of practicing mindfulness, experiencing sound wave therapy, doing breathing exercises and the like. Unbroken Spirit does many of the same things, but does it a little bit more in the head, that then through for the first 6 weeks of their modules of education and training, they go then into a hike or an adaptive sports experience, and then afterward mentorships. So that has given me the rope team, so to speak, and the experiences to break away. Also, I call my clinical counselor. I am a board certified chaplain, so I'm a clinician, and so I call my counselor on a regular basis to make sure that my head is straight and to, in some cases, blow off steam. In terms of the rest of the story, again, practicing mindfulness, making sure I journal on a regular basis, and also that I exercise where I do a lot of my prayer time or my meditation. And so those things are key elements for me as I go forward along the journey with Gretchen. And that's self-care, and self-care is essential for the caregiver, because if we don't take care of ourselves, we can't take care of anyone else. And we need to be physically, mentally, and spiritually balanced, and that an integrated individual in order to care for the other person. Otherwise, as I saw in my mother caring for my grandfather years ago, the anger would either explode or it would leak out. And the leaking through passive aggressive behavior and the like is not it's not palatable, it's not good, and even blowing and getting really angry and maybe even getting abusive, she with words, but it just is not the way to go. So self-care is the first line of defense and first order of business, for at least for me. And I would recommend that for anyone else. And whenever possible, have someone on your rope team that you trust explicitly, that you can share your deepest fears, concerns, frustrations, and joys.
Yeah, I absolutely love the notion of having a rope team, right? In other spaces, I've heard ladder holders, right? Those that'll hold your ladder steady when life sometimes feels a bit unsteady. But what I heard you also say, and Gretchen, I wanna bring you into this piece too, is you all seem to have intentionally made the decision to know that your physical health and your mental health was important, but you ensured that your whole health was important, making a conscious decision to not solely focus on what's the matter with you, right? As Gretchen as the veteran, and as Bob, you as the caregiver and husband, but what matters to you, right? Let's talk a little bit about that, because I think sometimes as caregivers and those that need help of a caregiver, we live in a society that focuses a lot on what's the matter with you, right? But how can we empower or encourage those that are in the audience today to shift the mindset a bit and think about what matters to you in your journey, in your recovery? As we think about grace and grit and gumption and gratitude, how do we build that? How do we build that fortitude?
I think for me, my injuries were pretty severe. I mean, I was totally a hearing person, and then all of a sudden I wasn't. And that was scary for everybody because it stops your immediate way to be able to communicate easily about everything, how you feel, what hurts, what makes you happy, what you want, one of those things. So, that was a big hurdle. And then I had a traumatic brain injury. And so here I was, this high functioning, person who could remember phone numbers and this, and then I wasn't. And then I had severe PTSD, and then I had some just physical problems. Back took a big hit, and when I was hit with this explosion. So, in my mind, I initially thought to myself, I just got to get my body back to where I can just live without being in constant pain. And then, I think that sometimes clinicians err on the side of what they think is going to be best for this particular person, or in my case, this veteran. And, they're looking at me, and I'm a 46-year-old, very petite woman, and I've been, blown up. And they're trying to say, okay, maybe you can't do the things that you used to do. And that's when the fight in me kind of came up there, because I didn't see myself. Here's what I thought. The bomb took a lot of things from me. It took part of my face. It took my hearing. It took some of my insides. It broke a bunch of bones. It made me frightened of things I'd never been frightened before. But what it didn't take from me was that person, Gretchen, deep down inside of me. They couldn't penetrate that. And I wanted that person, that Gretchen, to be able to come out. As I'm trying to do that, I've got people who are smarter than me, who know that maybe, it's not going to look like I want to look like. And in their defense, they're trying to protect me from myself. So like Robert will tell you, barely months after I got blown up, I'm wanting to get back into marathon running, and I'm wanting to get back into biking, and I wanted to climb mountains, and I wanted to do all these things. And he's thinking to myself, your brain is still swollen from the blast. You can't hear. You've got PTSD, and as any spouse would want to do, and even my doctors were reinforcing this, was let's take this a little bit easier. But I felt like every day they went further, and this was my own brain telling me this, that I was losing ground, that I was losing Gretchen, and that if I didn't do something pretty radical pretty quickly, I was going to become somebody that I didn't want to be, or that I didn't feel comfortable being. I didn't want new hobbies. I wanted my other ones that I had before I got hurt. Okay. And so part of it was me realizing that I had been that hurt. I was still in denial. See, I'm thinking, okay, yeah, I got blown up, but I'm still walking around. Okay. And I learned how to lip read, and I learned how to do all kinds of things, and I threw myself into recovery because I wanted my life back. But in reality, Qwynn, it wasn't that simple. But I refused. And so I was not a good patient. I was not a good, I pushed back. Don't tell me I can't do that. Don't tell me I could get hurt. Don't tell me that that's not safe. Don't tell me that. And so that made it even more difficult for my rope team and my caregivers, my clinicians, and especially for Robert, who, once you walk out of the doctor's office, he or she is done with you for a while, but that caregiver goes home with you. And now he's got to navigate this headstrong, determined person who has little regard for how her body and mind has changed. And I want my life back. And I'm willing to put myself at risk to get it. And that was the hard road for Robert to navigate because it was scary for everybody. I've had doctors look me in the face and say, "Do you have a death wish? Are you trying to kill yourself?" And I said, "No, but I want to go back to doing what I was doing before I got hurt. I'm not broken. My disabilities do not define who I am or what I can accomplish." And I was trying to say this. What we had to do was find that middle road to let me be Gretchen, to let me live the life that I want to live, and yet be aware that in reality, I do have some limitations, even like a normal able-bodied person has limitations, okay? Even as we age, things, are not as easy as they be. I went out for a run this morning and, I'm 64 years old and used to, I could not even think about it and go out there and, and kill sub 7-minute miles and then come back and whatever. It's not that way anymore. Right. Okay. It takes me longer to recover, and it has nothing to do with my injuries. It has to do with just, the longevity of my life. But the big battle, I would say in the very beginning for me was I was trying to fight my way out of being injured and not accepting that I really was injured. Okay. I was not going to accept that I had changed in any way. And you couldn't convince me otherwise. And so that, that's where I was coming from.
And I think what defines Gretchen in this situation is she discovered that she wasn't disabled. She was enabled as a mixed ability person. For every handicap that she had, she gained another. She lost her hearing, she became a lip reader. And on through the whole course of her recovery, she found new elements and new capabilities that she had and competencies that she could recover or learn anew. And I think that that's something that she and our rope team, particularly Team Unbroken, are all about in terms of making sure that people get off the couch, recognize that they have capabilities, competencies, and capacity to do great and marvelous things, and they don't have to just sit and live with that label disabled. Enabled, mixed ability.
I am sure my amazing colleagues at PsychArmor are capturing all these themed words alongside of me because they're important. Gretchen mentioned that she wasn't a good patient. Her words, not mine, right? So you mentioned you weren't a good patient. And I think about you sharing that you sustained your injuries in your 40s. And here you are in your 60s, and we're talking about aging and longevity. I think it's important to have that discussion, right? As the veteran, as the caregiver, what do we need? And Bob, this is a question for you, especially because you mentioned that you are a Dole Fellow. What are some of the things, if you had your way, what are some of the things that we can do in order to support the evolving needs, right? Because as we age and as longevity happens, there are other things that are going to happen in regards to our health, our bodies, how we care for one another. How can we put measures in place where we can support the veteran and the caregiver as aging happens?
There are several steps. Number one, as a Dole Fellow and as a former VA senior leader, I think that we in the VA particularly need to do a little bit better job of ensuring that respite care is provided, that there's space for that grace that's available for anyone who needs respite care. Caregivers need respite care, and also enable that capability within facilities beyond the VA through community care. Also, people may not realize, but VA does sponsor a caregiver incentive, and they will provide a stipend for caregivers. However, that program is limited and is being explored to be expanded. So people need to be aware that that's an available asset if they served in the military. And their spouses would be the ones, or their children, because those hidden heroes, children, also are caregivers. So there are about 5 million caregivers to military personnel at this present time, both adults and children and young adults. Also, I have this idea. Well, we're fortunate because we got long-term care insurance, because we were advised to do that very early on in our life and our marriage. But I have heard something new and exciting, and that is that volunteerism can pay for long-term care. In China and also in the Scandinavian nations, young people, because throughout the world, you all know that children are a minority and elders are becoming the majority. And so we have to figure out a creative way to fix that. Well, Scandinavia and China have done something great through causing people or asking people to volunteer, and through that accrue tokens or an annuity that will then be able to be shifted to their care later in their lives. I thought that when I heard this a week ago, that this was one of the best things ever, because number one, we need to be connected people. We need to have that connected way of knowing and bridge the generations in this, especially in our nation where we're all fenced in on our properties, and division seems to be the word of the day rather than recognizing unity and diversity. This would spawn a new understanding of people globally as well as locally. And I think that it's a great idea, and I'll see if I can get it started here in Texas, because everything's bigger in Texas. So I want to make sure we do it bigger, better, and hopefully faster, so that people can can continue to not worry about these things. Because one thing Gretchen said to me, the first time I go south, or I have a challenging situation, or I'm starting to lose it, you're putting me into long-term care. You're not going to take care of me or see me that way. Now, that's not my nature. My nature is to nurture. And yet, I'm Gretchen in that. And that's something we have to recognize. And so we also need to look at developing long care facilities. In our nation, there's a real lack of them, especially those that provide graduated care, starting with residential living, and then going to wellness care, and then onward and upward into full-time care. So we really need to also emphasize the need for good, safe retirement locations, especially where you can do graduated care.
And I'd like to say, I think what Robert said was very important, in that, I was very open and verbal about what I wanted. Should I go, like he said, I go south, of what I wanted. And I think it's important that the person who's receiving the caregiving, voice that. So what I basically said to Robert, when I get to the point where I can't bathe myself and things like that, I don't want you to be that person to do that. I want a person that's not my husband to do that. And then I want you to be the person that brings me chocolates and martinis. Okay.
Yes, the chocolate and martinis.
Yeah. Does that make sense to you? I want to draw that line when it comes down to this, because I think it would hurt and this is just Robert and I, our relationship and the way that we see each other. And you know, maybe it's my dignity that's getting in the way here, but I don't want my husband doing those type of caregiving duties, okay, that are really truly personal. I want rather a trained, you know, person who's taught to how to bathe someone or help someone go to the bathroom or help someone get dressed or whatever, do those things. And then I want my husband as the caregiver on the other side still to be more husband than caregiver.
Mhm.
And so, you know, we had that discussion, and I think it's important people who are in the situation that Robert and I are in, who, you know, one person really is the caregiver, that you speak that in love, okay, and say, this is what I really want, and this is why I want it, okay, because I still want to see you as a handsome man coming to me. I don't want you to bathe me, and then, you know, because I think you'd lose the romance. Maybe that's, you know, just me, okay, and I'm trying to preserve this, my dignity of this man that I love, who still sees me in a favorable light, and not be the person that he has to do all the crazy things that you might have to do for a person who can't do it for themselves. And so, you know, I voice that, and I think it's important that people voice what they want that to look like when it gets to that point, before it gets to that point.
And in light of that, it's really hard for the caregiver to give it up so that a professional caregiver can provide support. And I think the distinction is really important. And I don't know whether we have to find another name for the professionals or whether we need to find a better name for those of us who are providing support at home. But there's a distinction between the two. And one comes out of love and volunteerism and a heart of service, and the other sometimes has those elements, and I pray most times that's the elements that are involved. But I've seen often that it becomes routinized care rather than whole health, continuous care. It becomes treatment, and treatment in Greek means to drag through. And I hope no one drags through with the caregiving of any human being.
Yeah.
And it could be even not in professional, it could be another family member. But I just don't want my husband doing those things. It could be my sister, it could be, you know, someone else. It doesn't, but I have a lot of respect for people who do caregiving professionally, because I think there's a real need for them. And I think that we need to appreciate what they can bring to the table by being that person who does those things, that for someone like me that doesn't want her beloved doing those things.
You know, this has become a master class, truly, because what I'm hearing you both say in this moment is how important it is to have these types of difficult conversations. And they're not easy. But as you mentioned, we have over 5 million caregivers caring, providing care. It's imperative that we set them up with some level of success to know, as we age, as our needs evolve, these conversations are not simply conversations on what our wishes are. These conversations are gifts to our loved ones, true gifts, to know you want to keep your romance alive. You know, because let's be honest, you're still living, right? So you want those aspects of your life, of your relationship, to keep thriving. So for those that are in the audience, I hope you're hearing Bob and Gretchen say, have these conversations, have them often, because you have the right to change your mind, right? You have the right to change your mind. So have these conversations often. Let your loved one know what you still love. If it's martinis and chocolate, that's important, because that brings you a piece of joy, right? When things get difficult and challenging, find those silver linings, those moments that still bring that connection, that belonging, that grace, and that love back to the center of your relationships. Master class.
I'm glad you brought up the word belonging. I like to turn that phrase around. Longing to be.
Ooh, say it
Longing
again.
to be connected, longing to be someone who is in service of something greater, longing to be a person of passion and purpose and having a real place, a person longing to be seen and known and discovered and understood and respected. Longing to be causes us to belong because it demands us seeking connection.
That was a whole poetic prose you just created for us. Longing to be.
And that's really what kept Gretchen alive. She longed to be the person she knew she could be, even though she had all these scars and challenges. She longed to be someone who mattered and created memorable moments, marker moments in people's lives, and to enhance living in general. Anybody who's around Gretchen realizes there's a spark, there's an energy, there's enthusiasm for living. You cannot hang around Gretchen and not want to live. But that was her longing to be a contributor to the whole of society, contributor to our veteran population, contributor to their caregivers, getting people off the couch and getting them to live again regardless.
Yeah. And so in that breath of living again, and I've had the opportunity to sit in a space with both of you and glean for hours. I want to shift a moment and talk about Team Unbroken. And how you all have, what's the heart of Team Unbroken? And how did building this team contribute to your own healing?
So Team Unbroken was really born with my desire to go and compete in the world's toughest race. And so Mark Burnett, the producer, and Bear Grylls, you know, our everybody's hero, the guy that eats snakes and everything, they were putting on what they call the world's toughest race. And there were teams that had been doing adventure racing for like 20 years. And so this was the mothership of an adventure race. It was 10 days in Fiji, 480 miles, paddleboarding in the ocean, navigating only with a compass and a map, and trekking through the jungle. And so I wanted to do it, but what I wanted to do it with people like me, people like me who had endured a life-altering injury, illness, or trauma. And so I wanted to build this adaptive athletic team because I knew that was part of what saved me from wanting to kill myself, was that I was able to, like I said, get my life back. And so I reached out to a bunch of my blown up friends and I have a bunch of them, okay, and said, do you want to do this race with me? And they said, sure. And I don't think anybody believed that we were going to get in that race, okay? And so when I sent in our application, it got kicked back immediately because the person who was screening the athletes, I had to list if we had any injuries. It was worded, if you have any injuries, because these are elite athletes that participate at this level. These are not people walking around with big injuries, okay? They're in the best shape of their lives. They're elite athletes. And so it was like a little tiny paragraph. If you have any injuries, list them here. Well, it took me like 4 pages to list all the injuries of the people that I wanted to put on Team Unbroken, because we had all had these serious injuries. And so they kicked it back. And so I went back and said, well, why did you, deny us? And the lady said, you guys are like too beat up, too many injuries to participate. This is for elite athletes. This is the world's toughest race. And I said to her, we're all athletes in our own way. Okay. Like, I had just qualified for Boston a week earlier, and my other friend was on the Ninja Warriors, even though his whole right side didn't work from an explosion. And I had a type 1 diabetic on my team, a very severe, and I had a guy who had a broke back. And I said, but we're all competing, and we're competing against able-bodied people and doing quite well. And, and so and finally, I got kind of snarky, and I said, take me to your leader. Okay. The person who's actually going to make the decision here. Okay. Because she was a gatekeeper, and I get that. Okay. If I needed to get past the gatekeeper, what really finally happened was it got to Mark and Bear and Kevin Hodder, who was the race director. And everybody kept passing on it. And finally, they asked me to get on a Zoom call with them, and I got on a Zoom call. And both Mark and Bear are, as you know, veterans. They both served in the British military. And they said to me, Gretchen, we want to say yes to Team Unbroken, but we're afraid. And I asked him, and it was Mark who said this. I said, Mark, what are you afraid of? And he says, I'm afraid you're going to get hurt. And I started laughing because I said, Mark, I've already been hurt. I've been blown to smithereens, and so have all my friends on the team. We're past that. And this is when I said to him, I said, Mark, if you say no to me, you're saying no to a whole population of people who've been kicked to the curb by life. And you're determining for me, Mark, what I can and cannot accomplish. And I really feel like that is not your decision, but that is my decision. And what I'm begging for you to do is to put us on the same playing field as everybody else and just watch us. And if we wash out on the first day, that's on Team Unbroken. But if we don't, then look what you've done. And I said, I'm begging you to open the door for those of us of mixed abilities. And he said, yes. And so Team Unbroken went, and we competed, and we had the worst gear and the worst uniforms because we didn't have sponsors like, Nike and Specialized Bikes and all this. We had no sponsors. We had $40,000 that Robert had taken from our retirement account, and he handed it to me, and he says, go live your dream. And so I took 5 other adaptive athletes, and we went and competed in the race. And Emerson fell in love with Team Unbroken, not because we were very good at adventure racing, because we weren't, but what we were good at and what we demonstrated in front of 11 million people was grit and gumption and teamwork and hope. And that's what we had that the other teams, they probably had it too, but they didn't have to rely on it like we did, because they were, they didn't have to figure out how to communicate with me on the side of a mountain in the middle of the night when I couldn't see someone's face to be able to hear what I needed to do, that we figured out how to do it with a flashlight. We figured out how to do things with the guy whose right side didn't work. We had to figure out all these things in a different way. And what it demonstrated was the strength of our rope team and the strength of our grit and our gumption. And we didn't care how we finished that race. The victory for Team Unbroken was that we opened a door that had been closed before. And 6 months later, after Mark produced it, and it's still on Amazon Prime right now, Mark communicated with me, and he said, Gretchen, he says, I didn't know I had those thoughts about people with mixed abilities. He said, I didn't realize that I was putting people like you in a box and determining what I thought you could do. And he says, you changed my whole perspective on this part of life. And he says, and he asked me, I got 2 things to ask you. And one is that Team Unbroken keeps telling your story, and that you guys keep doing what you're doing, because people are writing to him, to Mark, every day and saying, I got off the couch because I saw Team Unbroken. And people who are just like me, who've got something wrong with them, go out there and give it their best shot. There is something really healthy about showing up at the start line and giving it your best shot. That is the victory, not crossing the finish line. The victory is having the courage to show up and live the life you want to live, because it's scary to do that when you've got all these barriers and obstacles in your way, and people, even with good intentions, telling you that you can't or that you shouldn't. You have to break through that and say, this is what I want for my life. This is the legacy that I want to leave behind. When it's all said and done, nobody's going to remember much about me, but I hope they'll remember this, that I believe that if you want to, you can and you should. And I will help you.
And I just want to add one thing. Did you hear the power of yes? We need to say yes to those who we care for and we give our care to, so that they might fulfill their dreams. We need to be, as in the Bible, that my Christian scriptures, Barnabas, to be an encourager. We need to encourage our spouses, our loved ones, to follow their dreams, to keep
it's
hope
okay
alive.
if you fail. We didn't finish that race, but also 20% of the other teams didn't finish it either. But that didn't matter to us. What matters is that we convinced Mark Burnett, a man of influence, to say yes and to give us a chance. And that was back in 2019. And Qwynn, we were still doing amazing things, Team Unbroken, and we've touched lots of lives, and we'd love to see people overcome the obstacles and barriers in their lives. And we were like, and it fulfills us in a way that nothing else does.
And it's a team made of civilians and military personnel. So it's not just for the veterans, it's for all people to realize that we need to link up to one another.
So I saw y'all earlier this summer, and can we talk to the audience about where you all were heading and what you all did this summer?
So this summer we climbed Kilimanjaro, and we really called it Manny's Mountain. Manny's a member of Team Unbroken, and a year ago, Manny, who's this incredible Marine, physically fit. He was in the New York City Fire Department. He was a lieutenant about to make captain. And then one day, actually after coming back from training for a race, his stomach didn't feel well, and he went in and they diagnosed him with stage 4 colon cancer. And I remember the day that Manny called me and told me and I just said to him, Manny, what can I do? How can I best support you? And he says, I need to do things that take my mind off my treatment and my diagnosis. And I so got that, because that was me when I first got hurt. I needed something to take my mind off my treatments and my diagnosis. And I go, what do you want to do? And he goes, I want to climb a big mountain. And so we decided to climb Kilimanjaro. And there were 7 of us. And it was one of the most beautiful experiences. And let me tell you, it is a challenging thing, okay? I mean, tell you, and Robert and I had to turn back at 15,000 because I got altitude sickness, but the rest of the team went all the way to the top. And
they carried our heart.
Manny got to the top. And that was the victory, was to get Manny to the top. And so that he could, have this moment in spite of his diagnosis, in spite of his doctors telling him, I don't think you should do this. But what his doctors didn't know, and even though Manny tried to explain it, was, you don't understand who I have on my team. I can't describe to you what these people do for me. And he goes, I wouldn't go do this with anybody else, but this is my team. This is Team Unbroken. And everybody on the team, Anne's a type 1 diabetic, and we all have these issues. And we know together we can do it, or at least we're going to give it our best shot. And so, that's the whole thing that we're really trying to say to people out there, is that I know how it feels to have somebody look you in the face and say, your life as you know it is over. And you've been dealt a new hand, and it's a crappy hand. It looks bad in the beginning, okay? Maybe I had 4 kings and an ace, and then all of a sudden, after I got injured, I had 2s and 3s. But let me tell you, okay, you can play those cards. You just have to switch them in for better ones, and you got to figure it out. And you can't quit on yourself. You just can't. You have to say, what is it that I want this life to look like? And think about it. and put it into play, knowing that sometimes you're going to knock it out of the ballpark and sometimes you're going to strike out, and that's okay. Okay. Everything I've tried has not been successful. Okay. We've had lots of failures along the way. We've had lots of things where we simply said, I cannot do that. I physically cannot do that. Okay. And that's okay. But what we say in Team Unbroken is this: we're not afraid of failure, we're afraid of regret.
I love it.
So we say yes, and then we go do it. And if we succeed, then we're high-fiving each other. And if we don't, what have we learned along the way? But we'll never say to ourselves late at night, gee, I wish I had climbed that mountain. Gee, I wish I had run that race. Gee, I wish I'd have shown up and had that conversation with that person that I needed to say. We are afraid, we're deathly afraid of regret.
You know, thank you, Robert, for being the encourager, right? Cheerleading and championing Gretchen on to do all the things that she is doing alongside of you and alongside of Team Unbroken. The inspiration that you have provided in this space today will remain with each and every one of us. You have shown us the power of what we can do together. The power that even though we may be mixed ability, we still can, as long as we have our rope team. I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge the fact that you made history, her story, last month on your birthday. You received a Purple Heart for your acts, for quite honestly, you know, I'm gonna go off script for a moment, for a multitude of things, for your legacy of who you are, for the lives you've saved, for all of it. And Gretchen, it is such an honor to know that you were and you will continue to be honored for what your life has shown us all, for what you have shown us all in terms of we are not broken. I thank you from every fiber of my being. I thank you for who you are. Bob, I thank you. I owe you a dance when I see you next month.
Amen.
Because what you all are continuing to do, and once again, I'm going to say it again, this is a master class. My hope is that this becomes a ripple effect where we all see the need to have community care, compassionate community care, not sympathizing for what our veterans and caregivers are going through or experiencing, but empathizing, and as a way to say, thank you for your service, figure out ways that are actionable to provide that respite, to provide that level of volunteerism that can impact the lives of our service members, our veterans, families, caregivers, and survivors. So I know there is so much more that we can discuss today.
Write your congressmen and your senators and your local officials, especially to provide caregiver support and perhaps even become a caregiver community. That's actionable, that can happen now.
Agreed. Now, I noticed that I think everyone was so engaged in this conversation that there were more positive comments than questions. So what I will say is please feel free. I want everyone to have the opportunity to reflect on this session. I want you to think about for yourselves, what do you long to be? Fill in that blank for yourself. Get a post-it somewhere, whether it's in your car, in your bathroom, in your bedroom, and dream Dream. Don't be afraid to dream. Find your rote team, acknowledge your rote team, and share with them what you envision for a better world. It's okay to do that. I think Gretchen and Bob showed us the roadmap and the blueprint just on how to do that. So with that, I thank each and every one of you for joining this important yet heartfelt conversation today. My friends, Gretchen and Bob, thank you for sharing your heart with us all. Thank you for allowing us to glean. You shared practical knowledge, strategies, and wisdom. I cannot thank you enough. So right now, for everyone that's with us, on your screen, you are going to see a pop-up. We would greatly appreciate a few more moments of your time to provide your feedback. For those that can't scan that QR code, the link will be thrown in a chat if you need it there. For the caregivers and family members that are on our line and joining with us today, I hope by hearing Gretchen and Bob, you realize you are not alone in this journey. Many of us share these experiences, and there was an abundance of resources. I know Bob shared about retreats that we will be sure to share with you in an email that can support us all. I want to kick it back to Gretchen and Rob as we close this out.
I just want to say thank you for the opportunity, to be able to share some of the things that Robert and I've been through is an honor, because again, it speaks to our heart. If we can help one other person navigate life as a caregiver or as a person receiving care, both are challenging. And we want to help. We want to make it better. We want to make it the best. So it was just an honor to be with you, Qwynn, and thank you for everybody who made this possible. And I know I'll see you again in a month or so. In the meantime, be well. And again, thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely. Bob, you're on mute.
It's been a great opportunity to spend time with my fellow caregivers and also perhaps their spouses or loved ones. It is so important for us to take care of ourselves and to love on ourselves as well as love on those we want to serve and care for. So I'm just asking and praying that people take a position of balance and take care of themselves as they go forward on the journey. But always and wherever possible, since I live with the person who is known for incidents and accidents, give sufficient room for that person to live the life you've been called to live, and have fun doing it. Keep that smile on your face and spread joy where you can. Hope, huge dreams. That's all I have. Blessings on you, Qwynn, and thank you for everything. And I look forward to that dance, because being the type of musical folk we are and having that sense of aliveness, we just want to keep on dancing through life, singing, dancing, and for my wife, romancing.
Okay, y'all. So that means this weekend, martinis and chocolate are on you.
Amen.
All right, everyone. If you have any questions about today's conversation, you can connect with the Psych Armor team at support@psycharmor.org. That is it for today. Thank you once again for being here. We hope that you are inspired beyond measure. Now go out and dream and continue to figure out what you long to be. Have a good one.